Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40k Universe. I am your host Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about the Unification Wars. Now, before we get into the different Space Marine first founding legions, there's a bit of background information I want you guys to learn. So we're going to go into 40 facts about the Unification Wars. During the Unification Wars, also known as the Wars of Unification, the Unity Wars, the Unification, or just the Unity, were a series of conflicts fought on Terra during the 30th millennium at the end of the Age of Strife. It was during these campaigns that the Emperor of Mankind first publicly revealed himself to a desperate humanity, and began his conquest of Terra to unify the Techno-Barbarian nations that dominated the sacred homeworld of mankind, and to forge the foundation of the Imperium of Man. During the turbulent era known as the Age of Strife, the Sol System and the nearby star systems that had been colonized by humanity during the Dark Age of technology were effectively cut off from interstellar travel and communication. Every world colonized by man was left to fend for themselves, and even the once mighty world of Terra, Mars, and Luna fell into turmoil. During this dark time, Terra sometimes held sway over the Sol System, while other times the rulers of Mars or Luna were dominant, but the different worlds found themselves constantly at war. During this long 5,000-year period of anarchy, fear, and violence, Old Earth, once unified planetary government, had completely broken down and been divided into dozens of warring states of so-called Techno-Barbarians. Techno-Barbarian warlords and their warrior hordes continuously fought over the planet, which had become little more than a massive battleground for their war of attrition. They made use of chemical, biological, and even thermonuclear weapons of mass destruction, and they slowly transformed the cradle of mankind into a battered, post-apocalyptic wasteland across most of its sacred surface. It was against this backdrop of oppression, violence, and casual brutality that the Emperor of Mankind first revealed himself to the people of Terra. In secret, he had been planning for this moment in history for millennia, ever since the Age of Strife had fractured what remained of the ancient human federation. With his massive army of genetically enhanced warriors who comprised the first units of the Imperial Army and would serve as a prototype for the later development of the Space Marines, the Emperor began his conquest of Terra with the intent to reunite the warring nations into a unified planetary government. Once unleashed, the armies of the Emperor swept before them like wheat before the harvester's scythe, until all the Techno-Barbarian warlords had either been conquered outright or had agreed through diplomacy to become subservient to the Emperor's will. During this time, the Emperor created a number of military organizations, such as the Imperial Army, which would become the nucleus of the armed forces that would support his Legionis Astartes and his reconquest of the human-settled worlds. Amongst the early Imperial Army units that saw action during the Unification Wars were such venerable regiments as the Geno 52 Kilead, which would become one of the oldest and most respected regiments within the Imperial Army. Like many of these early regiments, the Geno Soldiers were created through the use of some of the Emperor's sophisticated genetic engineering techniques, developed in his laboratories beneath the Himalayan mountains and on Luna. The most elite of this first generation of genetically engineered super soldiers were known as the Thunder Warriors, men who were physically stronger and more formidable in combat than even the later Space Marines, though they were engineered to be vicious killers and lacked many of the more noble aspects of the Astartes. The Thunder Warriors were engineered to be the means to an end, and were never intended to be integrated into the Emperor's new realm after unity had been achieved. Through genetic engineering and selection, the standard Geno Soldiers displayed many of the characteristics of the perfect human warrior. They were physically more resilient, stronger, and capable of taking more damage than any of their unaltered Techno-Barbarian foes. These regiments would eventually be referred to as the Old 100, and would form the core of the initial military force that embarked upon the Emperor's galaxy-spanning Great Crusade in the early 31st millennium, beside their newly created Space Marine legions. The Emperor accepted the death of so many innocents that resulted from the conquest of Terra with great remorse, in order to achieve the greater good of unifying humanity and protecting it from the manifested warp and the predatory xenos of the galaxy. Unimaginably large, full-scale battles during the Unity campaign would last for weeks on end, with body counts in the millions that sundered mountains and split entire continents. The Imperial Historical Chronicles tell of the last battle of the Unification Wars, known as the Battle of Mount Ararat, which was fought in the kingdom of Urartu. It was rumored that during this final battle, the remaining Thunder Warriors were slain to a man. The chronicles recorded that the famed Thunder Warrior, Erica Tyrannus, known as the Lightning Bearer, raised the banner of lightning at the final declaration of unity, which established the rule of the Emperor of Mankind over the entirety of Terra before dying of his wounds. Unfortunately, this heroic version of the events was completely false. The Thunder Warriors had not died to a man during the final battles of the Unification Wars. They had been brutally disposed by the Emperor's own servants in his order. The Thunder Warriors had been betrayed by their own creator, a terrible secret skillfully concealed from the people of the Imperium for more than 10,000 Terran years. When the Unification Wars were completed at the end of the 30th millennium, the Emperor forged a new unified planetary government under his leadership. He next journeyed to Mars and met with the adepts of the cult Mechanicus. In return for the use of the Mechanicus Vast Manufactorums, the use of its Titan legions, and the orbital shipyards to construct the weapons and starships he would need for the Great Crusade to reunite mankind under the banner of the Imperial Truth, the Emperor agreed to grant the newborn Adeptus Mechanicus complete autonomy on Mars and its other forge worlds, as well as the exception to the atheism required by the Imperial Truth. This agreement, known as the Treaty of Mars, marks the true foundation of the Imperium of Man in the alliance between Terra and Mars. To learn more about the treaty and to learn more about the Adeptus Mechanicus, please check out our 40 facts on the Adeptus Mechanicus. Let's backtrack a bit and talk about what the world looked like during the Unification Wars. During this time, there was only one remaining ocean on Terra, the so-called Great Ocean, which was the ancient Pacific Ocean. The size of the Pacific was vastly smaller than it once was, due to the vaporization of a massive stretch of the ocean during the nuclear wars that had consumed much of old Earth in the lost years of the Age of Strife. This missing portion of the Pacific stretched from the Marianian Trench down past Australia and all the way to the frozen continent of Antarctica. The Atlantic Ocean also had been largely vaporized, as the great body of water that had once been near Europe was now mostly gone, particularly to the south of what had been the Iberian Peninsula. Other, smaller bodies of water may still have remained during this time, as a great body of water is recorded to have been present in the region of Eurasia where the Caspian Sea had lain in the past. These bodies of water still exist at the start of the Horus Heresy in the early 31st millennium, but by the time of the 41st millennium, Terra had no freestanding bodies of water, having become a world completely covered by dense urban areas of massive hive cities. Within these hive cities toiled the tens of billions of Adeptus Terran bureaucrats and serfs required to keep the decaying heart of the Imperium of Man pumping. Before the Hive Cities existed Techno-Barbarian states, starting with the Ecumendus Empire, which was situated in the Middle East in the area of the pre-First Millennium Persian Empire, centered roughly in the ancient nation-state of Iran. The Ecumendus Empire is noted as being made of the wealthy tribes who were quickly to ally with the Emperor's Imperium of Man during the Unification Wars, and therefore avoided the horrors of atomic war and invasion by the Emperor's superior armies of the genetically engineered soldiers. Their genomes were uncontaminated by the inherited flaws and viral defects of other tribes, caused by centuries of exposure to lingering radiation and biological warfare, making them good candidates for recruitment into the newborn Space Marine legions after the Unification War was completed. Many early candidates were recruited from this state to become the first Astartes of the Thousand Sons Legion. The Ecumendus possessed a superstitious belief in the mystical powers of their ancestors. Emblems of Dul Carnadin, the greatest of the kings, were often used as charms against harm by the population. And those were 40 facts about the Unification Wars. This video was really fun to make. I hope it was fun to listen to. We're going to get part 2 where we learn more about the different Techno-Barbarian states. But what makes this video series really cool, or this short video series cool, is that we get to learn about what Terra was like before. So we get to connect those states to what we see today, because Terra is Earth. Really awesome. Really love this. Please comment, subscribe, check out the channel for more Warhammer 40k content. And if you already did all that stuff, you're awesome. Continue painting, and I'll see you in the next one. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.